Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, another exciting guest. Check this out. Imagine a relationship. We all want it. We all strive for it. But there's never been a recipe for success in relationships. I know we look at our parents, we look at loved ones, and we say, how did you do that? I even look at my baby sister and her husband. I'd be like, how did you guys do it? Because I've seen the ups and downs. And I often said to myself, is there really a success to this? And more importantly, imagine you're a little bit more mature in age and it's taking you a long time to kind of figure it out. And when you do, you go, wow. Today on the show, we have a young lady who, let me put it like this, restructured generational family dysfunction, reorganized the way in which she dealt with codependency, re-examined how she dealt with life in general. Let's welcome to the show, Barb. I'm going to make sure I get this last name right. Nangle.
Nangle. Close enough. Everybody mispronounces it for some reason. I don't know why.
Nangle, like dangle, like mangle.
Yeah, Nangle. Yeah.
To this show. How you doing, baby girl?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Before we get started, tell a little bit about who you are before we go down this beast mindset story of yours.
Okay. Well, currently I am a boundaries coach, speaker, and podcaster. I'm also a woman in 12-step recovery. In those programs, I identify as an adult child codependent and abstinent compulsive overeater. And I am a resident of New Haven, Connecticut, which is a small urban city. And if you had ever told me when I was growing up that I would ever live in a city, I would have never believed you, because I grew up in like rural suburban areas and I loved it. But I really love New Haven. I'm also a pretty spiritual person. My business is actually called Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. And what's wild about that is I was an agnostic until I was about age 37. So those are just some bits and pieces about me, but I'm happy to go into detail on any one of those.
Let's start here. It took a 12-step program to identify these traits that you possessed. Was therapy introduced to you?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah. I started therapy when I was about 15, Andre. So I was 52 when I got into when I got into recovery. So that's 37 years. And I wasn't in therapy that whole time, but very close. I also read a gajillion self-help books and did seminars and retreats and workshops and workbooks and spiritual, like you name it. And the way I think of it, Andre, is that all that stuff like scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, whereas recovery melted it. And it was pretty astonishing to me after a lifelong of personal development and commitment to growing and changing, how much I learned about myself in recovery, and almost none of it ever came up before. So for me, the 12 steps are where it's at. I know that that's not true for everybody, but I feel like I heard somebody say the 12 steps of recovery are an amazing technology for human change. And I love that phrasing, it's an amazing technology for human change.
Let's go back a minute. Why did the therapy not work for you? But before we go there, I'm going to focus on some things so people can understand where we're going with this situation. We're dealing with generational family dysfunction. So let's start there first. What was the dysfunctions that you was dealing with? And let me use this word again. Generational.
Yeah.
So this ain't some shit that just all of a sudden surface.
Generational. Yeah. So it's multiple generations. And, If you had asked me, did you grow up in a dysfunctional family? Yeah, I probably would have said yes, but I had no idea how dysfunctional it was. So we're talking about substance use, mental health disorders. We're also talking about a lot of dishonesty, secrets. I was probably 10 when I figured out that my dad was cheating on my mom. Around that same age, I found out that my mom secretly smoked cigarettes, which may seem benign. But when you find out that your mom has been hiding something and then basically had us kids collude with her and hiding it from my dad, that is poisonous. Like we say in recovery, you're as sick as your secrets. Everything in my family was about my dad and whether he was happy or not. So my mom was like the quintessential codependent. I really don't know what happened in my mom's family, except for that, she was one of 6 and she grew up on a farm and, that's a lot of kids. My dad's mom was a hypochondriac and his father was an alcoholic. He was one of those quiet, calm alcoholics. However, he was not, like a brutal, violent, loud alcoholic, but and then my grandmother, who was a hypochondriac, was orphaned at age 8. And actually her mom died, but her dad just took off. So she and her siblings were distributed to different people and weren't brought up together. And on my grandfather's side of the family, I don't really know what happened there, but he was an alcoholic. So the shit rolls downhill. Let's just put it that way. And I wasn't aware of, I knew that these things happened, but I wasn't aware of the significance of them until I got into one particular 12-step program. It's called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, or ACA. And I didn't know that I qualified for this program. I was in another program and went to one of these meetings and went, oh my God, this is me. And it turns out it's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover, and absolutely transformed my life.
What were some of the dysfunctional things that you was displaying? Because like you said, a lot of times,
yeah, Andre.
because a lot of times what happens is when we hear that word a lot now, dysfunctional family, but I tell people, look, I'm not a doctor nor a therapist, but I'm like this. Our parents are only as good as the tools that they were given.
Right, so, exactly, yeah.
So, it's funny how it's now has a label attached to it. I'm like, okay, well, how could you attach the word dysfunction when in hindsight 2020, what they were doing was not dysfunctional?
Well, it was.
That's how they programmed.
Yeah.
And how they learned.
Right.
But I think as time changes and we see these behaviors started to manifest, then we say, hey, that's not right. But to move forward with what I'm about to say is, as you got older and start to recognize things, behavior patterns that wasn't in the norm with society, what kind of behaviors were you demonstrating?
So it wasn't that I got older and started to recognize. I was in my 50s, Andre. I was well into adulthood, and it was through what happened, the 12 steps of recovery, the reflection, they call it a searching and fearless moral inventory, that I started to see my patterns and that they were dysfunctional. So I lied all the time. Meanwhile, I truly believed I was an honest person. I lied about cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, relationships. Mostly, I lied in the people-pleasing department, but it's still lying. But meanwhile, I thought I was honest. I didn't know that I had no boundaries at all. And ironically, I'm now a boundaries coach. And that's because codependence is my core wound, and boundaries are essentially the antidote to that. I had a very long string of very dysfunctional romantic relationships. I happened to date men, and like every man that I was in a relationship with, there was really heavy substance use, except for the last 2 relationships. And that's because I stopped drinking so heavily. I drank abusively until I was like in my early 40s. And I was super codependent, but I didn't even know that. So I always put way more effort into all of my relationships than the people I was in them with, whether that was my family, my friends, my coworkers, my boyfriends. I had all these, I now know, like wildly unrealistic expectations for myself, other people, and the world. And I would get super frustrated that things weren't going the way, like the political system wasn't working the way, the education system wasn't working the way that I wanted to. My coworkers weren't doing things right. The person I was dating wasn't doing things right. One of the biggest paradigm shifts I had in recovery was coming out of victim mentality. And I was bowled over to learn that I had this mentality because I've always felt like a powerful moment of agency. I never felt I could spot a victim a mile away because I was going to rescue, fix, and save that person. But for me, my victim mentality wasn't classic, where you go like, woe is me, the world is against me, nobody loves me. Mine was much more subtle. It was, if only he would fill in the blank, then everything would be okay. Or if only she would. It was complaining, blaming, and learning that I was really waiting around for people to change was like, oh my God, this is a huge, huge shift for me. And that, I've come a long way. I think I probably have 9 different episodes on my podcast about victim mentality, because every time a new layer of awareness comes up, I talk about it. I could go on, but lots of dysfunctional patterns. And the fact that I'm down over 100 pounds from my top weight, and I carried that extra weight around for decades. And then I drank abusively. I smoked bales of weed. I smoked secretly also for like 20 years, like my mom did. Like, all of those things are demonstrations of, this is not a healthy person. This is a dysfunctional person. Meanwhile, I had no idea how dysfunctional I was.
How did you manage to, no, let me go back. And congratulations for using the 12-step program to take you where you're at today. But let's go here for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all of these dysfunctional behaviors, which 3 was the most crippling for you?
Well, the codependence, for sure, because I put up with things that a woman of dignity and grace would never put up with.
Give me an example.
People saying horrendous things to me, humiliating me in public, being told my way or the highway and staying. So that's one, like the codependence, just, and also like the thing that got me in recovery is I invited a homeless guy that I had befriended at church to stay at my house during a snowstorm.
Oh my God.
After a few months. I now know that's not normal, but I thought I was nice. And he, of course he said yes. And then he stayed another time and another time. And within a few weeks, Andre, he was practically living with me, and I soon felt trapped in my home. Now, he was an admitted alcoholic and addict, and I now think he may have also been a narcissist. He definitely had narcissistic traits, and he fucked with my head in a way I had never experienced. And it literally brought me to my knees in what I call a codependent bottom, which was this extreme dilemma I had internally, where I felt this just drive that I had to save him. And at the same time, I was like, I need to get rid of him. And so it just kind of like tore me apart, and I literally fell to my knees. And that is really, I consider that to be like the breaking point for me.
It's so funny you said that. I remember taking in somebody as a roommate, and when that roommate.com crap came out, and this guy appeared to be pretty freaking nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. It happened twice. So one guy didn't pay his When it was time to pay his rent, he just like vanished. Found out he was filthy, came from a filthy rich family, but his parents were like, he's dysfunctional. We don't really fuck with him.
Mm-hmm.
So bought all this furniture in. It was a nightmare. Then the other person I bought in, because my home was pretty big, she changed the locks on my own house.
Oh my
So I'm gonna go here with this, and I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to be nice. We'll save money at the same time. Let's be real.
Yeah.
But you being a female taking the guy in from your church.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you worry about your own safety? You don't know this person.
For one thing, he was a pretty small dude, but also I knew him for several months. You know, I didn't just meet him yesterday. And, you know, we had become pretty friendly. And actually, right around the time he came to my church as a parishioner, I had volunteered to run a project serving homeless people. And I felt like it was like, oh, God bringing me a homeless friend to help me understand better the plight of homeless people, so that when I'm running this project, I'm not serving the homeless, I'm serving homeless people. And he actually was very helpful in that regard. So it never occurred to me to fear for my safety.
How did you wind up getting him out and trying to regain some
oh my God. You know, it's funny. It was like 11 years ago, so I don't remember all the details, but I remember specifically one time saying, you got to go. And I gave him $150 and he left, and he came back the next day and gave me back $100 and said, this is way too much money. And it just goes to show, like, he didn't even feel like, he thought having $150 was just like, it was like I gave him $1 million. And then I do remember another time driving him. I live in New Haven, Connecticut, which is on the New Haven Harbor, and he was from West Haven, the other side. I remember I drove him to the other side of the harbor and left him somewhere. And then I got word from a mutual friend that he was coming back to my house, and I literally packed up and went to another town for the weekend to stay with a friend, because I knew, Andre, that if he came knocking on that door, I was going to let him in. And I don't.
Yes. Okay, stop. What? Okay, you was gonna let him in. Why? Because you wasn't fully. You had your own issue.
As fuck. That's why.
Okay. Okay. I get it. I'm gonna say, were you not? Okay, so I get it. So now, that's a part of a dysfunction.
Mm.
When does it get to the point to where you realize, you know what, I need some help?
So it's different for everybody. I mean, somebody could hear me talking on this and go like, oh my God, that's me, and I need help. And then they get help. And somebody could hear this story 15 times and never get help and think things like, oh, it's not that bad, or, you know, I'm just being selfish, or, you know, I have so much more than they do. What if what are they going to do if I don't help them? Like, there's so many reasons that people don't see these patterns as dysfunctional. So really the core issue here, Andre, is trauma. Like, I didn't understand that I had trauma until I got into recovery. And I thought trauma was, you are raped, you're in a hurricane, you're in a war. And that's true, but we call that like big T trauma. But the trauma that is rampant in the human race is what a lot of people call little T trauma. And so this is often also called relational trauma. So this is where I call it like the drip, drip, drip of emotional invalidation. So, another way that I've heard it expressed is trauma results from unmet needs. I know my first 6 months in recovery, I kept being like, what is this trauma stuff? Like, and I knew that I really objectively did not have it as bad off as many of the people that I was in the recovery rooms with. But I knew that I had the traits and I knew I belonged there. And then it wasn't until I heard that trauma can result from the absence of good things happening to you. I was like, oh, okay, that happened. And then I later heard it can happen from unmet needs. And typically it's unmet emotional needs.
What were your unmet emotional needs outside? Was it more that you? Let me rephrase this. What were you missing in the child in your developmental years?
Well, I was missing. So I just want to make a little caveat here. Like, I know that my parents did the best that they could. It wasn't good enough, but it was all that they were capable of doing. And I intellectually understood that before recovery, but I really emotionally came to understand that and have a lot more compassion for my parents now than I ever did before. But it was, my parents not really understanding child development. It was, my father being incredibly self-centered. Like, for me personally, Andre, one of the worst things my father ever said to me was, "Do you want me to give you a reason to cry about?" And like, when you're 5, you don't even understand how the world works. And so, like, I'm 5, I'm crying, and you're telling me that I don't have a reason to cry. And it's like, it's crazy making for a kid. He said to me, "I'm gonna knock you into next week." And I remember thinking, oh my God, he's gonna hit me so hard, I'm gonna fly through time. And like, I knew that it was bad, but then I got older. I was like, oh, he's going to hit me so hard that I'm going to be knocked out for a week, and think like that. So trauma can happen from the threat of injury and from witnessing violence. It doesn't even have to actually happen to you. So that it's like a lack of safety, a lack of emotional safety, a lack of physical safety. So being teased, being humiliated, having sarcasm, not understanding what's going on. Like, my family had all these secrets, and somehow I knew without anybody telling me, we're not going to talk about the fact that you're 10 and you've already figured out dad is cheating on mom, which means mom must know. Nobody had to tell me, don't talk about this. So I had internalized, there are things going on that I perceive that I know that it is not safe to talk about. So that's just a few examples.
What about your siblings?
So I have a brother who is a year and a half older than me, and I had a brother who was 8 years younger than me. He happens to be deceased now. And so they were just part of it, like my older brother and I, he actually happens to be upstairs right this very minute. Until just about a year ago right now, he and I weren't talking for several years, and we recently reconciled and reconnected and have done an enormous amount of processing about the past. We've both apologized to each other. We've made amends to each other. We've cleaned up. We both were like, I've been lying my whole life, and here's some lies. But what I can see now is I literally, like, I always felt like, with my brother, and I don't mean physically, though he did, he always read, he always had a book in hand, and he would basically take the spine of the book and like hit me on the head with it. Like, that hurts a lot, even if it's a paperback. And I remember telling kids as a teenager, I practically have calluses on my back from my brother punching me in the back all the time. So, something was up with him. He was bullied also. So then that's, that makes sense that he would bully me. And then, my younger brother, we used him as like basically a little slave. Like, he worshiped us and we took advantage of it. And also I will say, my older brother is, a sober alcoholic. He's been sober for 30 years. My younger brother was bipolar disorder with psychotic tendencies and also had a substance use disorder. That doesn't come out of nowhere. Like, all 3 of us have addiction problems, that's not from nowhere.
Did your situation, different forms of addiction, ever really put you in harm's way that was pretty much life-threatening for you?
Life-threatening. I drove drunk a good jillion times. I got arrested for it when I was 22. Oh my God. Yeah, I drove drunk like all the time. So yeah, not only did I put myself in harm's way, I put other people in harm's way. I also were
you able to rational think?
Yeah, obviously. People don't continue to drive drunk without rationalizing it to themselves.
but you're rationalizing that you can handle it.
Yeah, like it's not that bad. Like when I got arrested, I was glad because I was hammered and I was about to get on the highway. I was literally like, I mean, thank God they arrested me. I can't even imagine what would have happened. And then I proceeded to drive drunk for years after that, by the way. Yeah, I'm not proud of this, by the way. But now.
No. I'm not here to judge. I'm just listening.
But listen, I will tell you, I'm not ashamed of it anymore because I'm not her.
Right.
That was a broken, troubled woman, and I am healed now. I am not that person. So I don't have any shame about it. And I think it's important to talk about this stuff. Like, I remember one night a few years ago, I was driving on my way to a 12-step recovery program, and there was someone who was very clearly drunk driving in front of me, and it scared the bejesus out of me. And I slowed way down so that when they crash, I'm not going to hit them. And I was so freaked out when I got to the meeting because that could have been me being the driver.
Mm-hmm. Check this out. Usually in a 12-step program, you have to make amends, so to speak. Mm-hmm. What was the toughest amends for you that you had to do?
The toughest. So I don't know if this is the toughest, but this is what's coming to mind. So this is what I'm going to share. Okay. So I realized through the 12 steps of recovery that there were a couple of people that I actually bullied. And I mentioned my brother was bullied. My brother was bullied his entire childhood, but so badly in 4th and 8th grade that the school got involved. And this is back before bullying was on the national agenda. Like if you got bullied, it was your fault, is essentially how people acted back then. So I knew about bullying and I was shocked to learn that I had bullied people. One of them was a girl that I went to school with, and one of them was a woman that I worked with when I was like 19, 20 years old. And I'm ashamed of that. You know, I'm not now because I know
How
that
did
I'm
you
not.
recognize that you bullied this person?
Right. And
like, what was the self-reflection?
So, well, it's like the 12 steps of recovery are 12 different steps that you take. And it's mainly, for me, it was mainly step 4, where you're asking, like, where were you like selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, afraid, you know, all these other different qualities. And it's pretty hard to not see, oh shit, that was bullying. You know, I owe amends for that, you know, so that's what occurs to me. I don't know if that was the hardest. And I think also like making amends to oneself is really hard, because what that entails is changing your behavior, your long-standing dysfunctional behaviors.
But you had to change a whole lot of behavior.
Oh my God, yes.
So let me go here. This is what I told my therapist, Steve Cooper, when I went to him. Great therapist, and Dr. Ross Santa Maria, 2 great therapists. But I remember telling Steve Cooper this. I was like, don't feed me a whole bunch of food, because I'm not going to be able to process. I'm regurgitated. Mm-hmm. You recognize what my trauma stems from. Mm-hmm. You taught me how to understand other levels of trauma that people have. Mm-hmm. This gives me the ability to decide whether or not I want it in my space or whether or not I want to deal with it. But because I know how to deal with it, it's easy for me now to deal with different levels of trauma with people. But he gave me steps to do that. And I said, I remember saying, let me pick out the most difficult one for me. And I remember telling him, if it takes me a year to get that one thing right, that's good. Then give me the next one. Then give me the next one. Give me the next one.
Smart.
With that being said, out of the 12 steps, what was the one that was the most difficult for you to really say, I got this? Because this is what usually happens. I see this on television. I've never been in a 12-step program. Mm-hmm. A lot of relapse happen off of one of those steps. Mm-hmm. What was the one that you had the most difficult time?
So, I mean, it has to be step 4, take a searching and fearless moral inventory of your life. And I want to say something about what you just said, which is that
Go right ahead.
a lot of relapse happens from that. So here's my understanding of that. So when you're in addiction recovery program, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, even Overeaters Anonymous, which I'm in, step 4 is to find out what you did or are doing. And that's really important to clean that up. In my ACA program, the trauma recovery program, it's more about what happened to me than what I did. I get at what I did by way of what happened to me. So here's an example. What happened to me is that I grew up in a family that engaged in indirect communication. If you had a problem with someone, you did not talk to that person. You talked to everybody around them, and you didn't talk about the behavior. You talked about the person. Okay. So what I did, Andre, is that I gossiped. Now, I didn't know that. I worked for the same boss for 19 years at Yale University, and I talked negatively about her behind her back for 19 years. And I was shocked when I got in recovery to learn that's gossip. Now, I'm not dumb, but that's the definition of gossip, like negatively talking about someone behind their back for years on end. But to me, I was just complaining. I was just commiserating. I was just getting corroboration. You don't need 19 years of corroboration from colleagues. And so I learned in ACA that I gossiped, but I also learned where it came from. So it takes away some of the guilt and shame. Whereas if I had been doing the 12 steps first in Overeaters Anonymous, I wouldn't have been able to look at my family of origin, the patterns of behavior that I was taught, because you're taught in the addiction recovery programs, you're selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and afraid. And that's all true, but it comes from somewhere. So in ACA, we're like, you're a product of your environment. Now,
Right.
one of the things that it says in the AA Big Book, which is the fellowship text for Alcoholics Anonymous and many others, is that we need to get down to causes and conditions. And the causes and conditions are typically intergenerational family dysfunction, which results in trauma. So if you have trauma, if you have been shamed your entire life and you do this searching and fearless moral inventory and you find out, oh my God, I've done all these horrendous things, you use it as ammo to beat yourself up instead of learning to grow and change. So one of the most important phrases I learned in recovery was this: this is info, not ammo. This is information for me to learn, integrate, and grow from. It is not ammunition to beat myself up. But I learned in ACA, I am a product of my environment. I still have to stop the gossiping behavior, but understanding where it came from takes the onus off of me as a defective human being, but rather as someone who was a product of her environment. And so I'm much less likely to relapse when I understand that than if I think, oh, you're a piece of shit, that's why you gossip.
Makes sense. Why do you think therapy wasn't a good fit for you, or did you combine therapy with the 12 step?
So I was in therapy when I got into 12-step recovery, but it was a coincidence. And once I was I'm the one that was like, oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon? My therapist was like, yes. And then when I was like, okay, I just found I'm codependent. What else don't I know about myself? And she didn't tell me, hey, you might look up the definition of codependence, but she corroborated it. And all my other therapists were essentially sounding boards. I got some good questions from time to time. They asked fruitful questions from time to time. I remember one time a book was recommended to me that was helpful, but mainly they just listened to me, for some of them for years. I've had a couple of therapists for 5 years. I had one for 7 years. That seems, now looking back, that seems crazy to me. And literally none of the things that came up about me in my first 2 to 3 years in recovery, none of them came up in recovery. Now, I will say I was not telling the whole truth to my therapists.
I was getting ready to ask
But
that.
I also know nobody does. Right. Like, I'm not the first person to not tell the truth to my therapist, but the truth, the things that I was telling them, there was lots of evidence. Like, for example, the gigantically long string of dysfunctional relationships.
Right. Let's go here. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
Long string, but now you're 7 years strong into this. How much of the lie part of the dysfunction crippled you from having a successful relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest lie that kept me from having successful relationships was, oh yeah, that's totally fine with me. I don't mind. Sure. Like, I just put up with stuff that I didn't want to put up with. I acted like I liked things that I didn't. I bent over backwards and accommodated, and I was like, oh yeah, like, so here's an example. When I was young, I drank beer because that's what everybody drank. And then I dated a guy who drank wine, so I drank wine. And then I dated a guy who drank Jack Daniels, so I drank Jack Daniels. And then I dated a guy who was a beer connoisseur, and I learned that I like Belgian. Like, I didn't even have my own damn drink, Andre. Okay? So I was being a chameleon because I thought, I didn't consciously think this. Clearly, subconsciously, I believed, oh, this is me being a good girlfriend. I was a New York Giants fan. I was a New England Patriots fan. I've been a Dallas Cowboys fan twice. Meanwhile, I don't care about football, but I felt like I need to be a good girlfriend. So I would say, the lie that what you like is more important than what I like is the biggest lie. Like, I think if I were to boil it down to what is, and for me, it's my healthy boundaries that enable me to be in a healthy relationship. And if I were to boil it down to one thing, it's like, I know what's okay with me and what's not okay with me. And I tell my partner as soon as it makes sense to do so. Like, if it's public, I'm not going to be like, that doesn't work for me.
Right.
And unless it's, if it's appropriate, then I will. Like, I'm not going to embarrass him publicly, but I'm also not going to put up with something that's not okay with me, even if it's in public. You know what I mean? Like, I have dignity and I treat my partner with dignity.
Before we wrap up, congratulations on finally getting it right. But this is the thing. How difficult was it for you to set boundaries? How difficult was it for you to now be able to navigate this relationship? Because let's get real, you're still in treatment.
Yeah. So I was 3.5 years in recovery before I started dating him. So I had pretty solid boundaries, and I knew, like, a lot of the women I was in recovery with were like, date. I was like, man, you know what? I'm really enjoying my life right now. It's not that I'm against dating, but I'm not setting up a dating profile. If I meet someone and we're compatible, yeah, I'll date them. And that's how I felt. And I knew this man has got to enhance my life if he's going to stick around. And I just was like, this version of Barb had never dated before. And I just knew, like, this is okay with me. This is not okay with me. And the first difficulty that we had was maybe 3 weeks into dating. I had invited him to join me for something. And he didn't text me back until 10 p.m. that night when the event was over. And I texted him back and said, I'm feeling really unsettled about the fact that you didn't text me back until now. Can you help me discuss this with you tomorrow? And he was like, yes. Now, Andre, I've never come right out and said to someone, I feel unsettled about this. And I've never said, can you help me talk with you about this? And here's a secret that I learned about men, at least heterosexual men. They like to be asked for you to help them. They actually do. And when we got together, I said to him, I see this as an opportunity for us to grow in intimacy together when we have this conversation. And I hope you feel the same way. I don't know where that came from, Andre. It's because I'm a different person now. And then
You have developed, I guess, with all of that 12 step, you started to develop what I call emotional intelligence.
Yeah, emotional intelligence and integrity. So I think the thing that happens for me now is I tell the truth. So when he said to me, when you say you're unsettled, what does that mean? I said, I don't know. That's why I said unsettled. If I could be more specific, I would. I just know that this doesn't sit right with me. Mm. So we talked about it and we processed it. And it turned out that I'm a very busy person because that's what I like to be. He is on disability and has a chronic illness. And he was like, I don't want to be sucked into your world. He didn't know that was what was going on until we talked about it. And he also said to me, I thought that me not answering you was an answer. And I was like, no. That's not an answer. Like going forward, that does not do. If you don't want to join me with something, simply say, I'll pass or no thanks. Don't just not respond. And that, I gotta say, Andre, that conversation we had, I really believe set the tone for our entire relationship. Like we both got conflict is normal. It's an opportunity to resolve it and increase our level of intimacy. It's not about someone blaming someone else or finding fault with people and keeping score. It's about what's the truth.
Let's go back before we wrap up. Let's go here. He said something, I don't want to be sucked up in your world. Mm-hmm. That's pretty deep. What did he know about, what had you shared with him about your world? It made him kind of go back and go, I can't imagine that him not doing a text would make him say something like that. Okay. So what do you know?
Can you see my calendar?
Yeah.
Okay, it's really full, right? He sees that and he goes, too much. Because he has a chronic illness. He has to manage his energy. So he thinks if he goes with me to this thing, that I'm going to now expect him to go to all these different things with him and be on the move. And he's like, I don't have the bandwidth for that. And that's not at all what I was expecting. I wanted to one time expose him to something that I was going, it was a pitch event for entrepreneurs. And I highly identify as an entrepreneur and I do a lot of networking. And it wasn't, you need to come to this all the time. It was, do you want to see the kind of thing that I do? And he didn't even really understand that it was, I don't want to be sucked into your world until we talked about it. And then he was able to articulate, here's what was going on.
How do you implement your boundaries, your new way of life, into sustaining this relationship so far? Mm-hmm. Because it's been seven years. Mm-hmm. What did he know about you before to even get to this level? Because I believe, let me rephrase this. I'm pretty sure with you reconstructing your life with the steps, you gotta do a serious inventory on who you bring into your life now, because he can cripple or hinder your progress. Mm-hmm.
Well, I met him through church, so I knew he was a church-going person, and he went to the same denomination as me, so I knew we had some things in common. And then after I met him, I saw him standing outside of a 12-step recovery program, so I knew that he was in 12-step recovery. So that's two gigantic bonuses, like two things we have majorly in common. And I also knew, Andre, that he has to enhance my life. And if he doesn't, then he's not sticking around. But he did a couple of things in the very beginning that showed me that he had really good boundaries. So our second date, we went to a museum. And I had donated blood that morning. I didn't know what was going on, but I was dehydrated and I got lightheaded. And I was like, I gotta get something to eat. And so there was a restaurant across from the museum. And I said to him, do you want to join me? And he was like, I'm afraid I can't. But he walked me over there. He put his hand very gently on my lower back to make sure. He walked me over there. He got me seated. He let me go. 45 minutes later, he sent me a text to find out how I was doing. So he cared for me. He told me he couldn't make it and was very comfortable doing that. He checked in on me. It was just, he did these caring behaviors.
Mhm.
And then 3 weeks into dating is when he said to me, I want you to look this up. It's the name of his chronic illness. It will give you a lot of information about me. So he didn't tell me day one, I have a chronic illness. He waited. He said, you seem interested in me, so I want you to know about this. So he didn't wait a year to tell me, but he also didn't tell me on the first date. So this says this guy's pretty savvy about how to relate to other humans,
Mhm. Wow, what a story. Let me go here with so much, and congratulations on your recovery process. I know it's still the journey. We never fully healed, so to speak,
Yeah,
but at least you
recovering.
keep the journey going. What is your recipe for success at this point?
Well, I think I would say my top 3 tools of recovery. Number 1 is pausing. Like, I cannot use any of my other healthy coping mechanisms in life if I don't pause. And for me, it often means pause and breathe. And often now, I don't even have to think about pausing. In the beginning, it was literally like learning how to climb Mount Everest to learn to pause because I was such a reactive person. So it means that I'm able to slow down and breathe. My body can just calm down, come out of fight or flight mode. My body can understand I'm safe, which means I can think clearly. My second is reaching out for help. As an over giver and rescue and fixer and saver and people pleaser, asking for help is no, because people come to me for help. So not only do I ask my higher power for help, I ask other people for help. And I asked the right people, because one of the reasons that I didn't ask for help is that when I was younger and I would ask the wrong people and I would get burned. And now I'm like, oh my God, I love help. Help is awesome. And then my third most important tool of recovery, and this is because of me being a codependent, is keeping the focus on myself. And I mean that in a variety of ways. One, I ask, what do I want or need in this situation? I never used to ask that. It was always about what do they need? Is this my business? I was constantly in other people's business and giving unsolicited advice and blah, blah, blah. Now I'm like, you know what? It's not my responsibility. I'm happy to help people and I still do, but I help people now strategically rather than at the drop of a hat. I do it by choice, not by compulsion. And I do it after filling my cup first.
Wow.
I also keep the focus on myself by asking myself, if something isn't working out the way I want, what's my part here? Instead of automatically assuming the other person did something, I'm like, what could I do differently to change this dynamic? And then another, my favorite way of keeping the focus on myself is taking really good care of myself. And I mean, when I said filling my cup first, right? What fuels me? So it's not self-care to me isn't like you go and get a massage once a month. I mean, that's great. It's daily. What do I do daily to fill my cup? So for me, it's prayer, meditation, exercise, journaling, that kind. I do a lot of reparenting stuff too. So, it's pausing, reaching out for help, and keeping the focus on myself are my top top three tools of recovery, and have been since the beginning.
Wow, that is so beautiful. You know what? I am so proud of you. I think
Thank you.
such a beautiful story. I think I never realized that the 12 steps could work in a situation like what you've just went through. And my hat says off to the 12-step program.
Yeah. It's 200 12-step programs now. The first one was Alcoholics Anonymous, which most people know, but now there's a recovery program for so many different things, not just physical addiction, but things like codependence, Debtors Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, all kinds of stuff.
So with that said, like I said, my hat's off to the 12-step program. I think that's great. I'm glad that it worked for you. How can the viewers reach out to you and know more about your program and if they just want to contact you?
Sure. So since they're already listening to a podcast right now, they can hop on over to my podcast, which is called Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. It's on all the platforms. My website is higherpowercc.com, and I have tons of free and paid, both inexpensive and expensive resources on healthy boundaries for personal boundaries, romantic boundaries, workplace boundaries, family boundaries. I'm going to be, I don't know when this is coming out, I'm going to be doing a boundary boot camp. I do that 3 times a year. And then I used to be on other other social media, but now I'm really only on LinkedIn at Barb Nangle.
Sounds like a winner. Thank you so much for taking time out to be on the show. Definitely love to have you come back. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, like, share, follow. Sometimes all it takes is one click of a button to make a difference in your life and change someone else's. This has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.